Hey everyone, welcome to Talking Tokens, a podcast focused on interviewing the best crypto founders, market players, and up-and-coming startups that are changing the industry every single Tuesday and Thursday. I'm Jacquelyn Melinek, your award-nominated host and former senior crypto reporter turned entrepreneur, and I'm excited to be here with you all. Now, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to Talking Tokens. It's a brand new podcast focused on interviewing the best crypto founders, market players, and up-and-coming startups that are changing the industry. I'm Jacquelyn Melinek. I am your award-nominated host and former senior crypto reporter, now turned entrepreneur, which we will talk about today with our guest, Anthony Pompliano. He is a longtime entrepreneur and investor who also co-founded a new business with me called Token Relations, which we launched earlier this month. So we thought it would make sense for us to sit down, talk about it, explain what's going on here as part of my flagship episode. And for what it's worth, a lot of the questions I'm going to be asking him, I probably already know some of the answers to. So in a way, this is more for the listeners than anyone else, but hey, maybe I'll learn something new too. So to start, Pom, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to do it. I'm shocked that I get to be the first guest, but let's do it.
Yeah, maybe this is going to be the last time, but we'll see. Hopefully it goes well. We could do like an annual episode. You know what I mean?
Perfect.
But I guess to start with Token Relations, how would you explain the business? Because a lot of people, I think, confuse us for marketing or PR. And I think what we're building here is something new.
Yeah. If you think about inside of a traditional company, there's usually three different communication efforts. There's marketing, which is specifically focused on how do you do customer acquisition, go get new people to don't know about you to find out about it, learn about your product or service and buy it, become a customer. You have PR, which is focused on, hey, let's go talk to people who have tons of distribution like journalists and get them to be educated on what we're doing so that then they can write about us, they can cite us, they can interview us, et cetera. And then there's this third bucket, and in each different part of the market, there is a different name for it. In the public markets, they call it investor relations. It's people trying to talk to the market, to Wall Street analysts, to shareholders, et cetera. In other parts of the market, they may call it retention type communications. You want to go and you want to talk to your existing customers and be able to explain to them what they're actually getting for the money that they're paying you. What is the product or service efficacy and why they should stick around. In the crypto ecosystem, there really is no one who is focused on what I think of as ecosystem stakeholders. And now ecosystem stakeholders is a very wide range because of the nature of these assets and these communities. So you have developers that are building in and around these technologies. You have entrepreneurs who are building on top of, let's say, a layer one blockchain. You have people who may be holding various assets. They could be NFT holders. They could be token holders. They could be people who are participating in LP pools or generating yield, staking, et cetera. Then you have people who I'll put in the kind of the service provider bucket. So these are people who are interacting with your organization or your ecosystem. And then you have what I'll call the kind of broader ecosystem. And so there, it may be somebody who is participating, using a product. Let's say they're building or they're using an app that's built on top of your technology, and they need to understand what's happening in that ecosystem. So it's this very broad range, but the types of communication you're going to do to that group is very different than marketing or PR. And so that's really where we're focused is how do we go and talk to the ecosystem more so than those other two buckets.
Yeah, I kind of joke that's where the company name came from, Token Relations. We just created a term and then a whole other kind of service that we could provide out there for people. So yeah, we got the market there.
Well, it's when we start businesses and we decided to partner with you on it, I think that this business checks a couple of very important boxes. One of the most important things is we have the potential to create and dominate a category. That usually is a pretty valuable thing to do. The second thing is that this was something that I had been told multiple times, like I think almost 20 times by various people I was talking to across the industry that this was a problem. So it's more of a painkiller than it is a vitamin. And then the third thing is when you think about these types of businesses is that there are other industries that have a potential solution where you have some blueprints and you can learn from them and say, okay, I'm going to take some of the best, practices or ideas from those industries. I'm going to bring it to this industry. So you're not necessarily starting from scratch. You've got somewhat of a framework, but you can change some things, right, to make it more applicable to this industry. And so just those three things alone increase the odds or probability of success. Doesn't guarantee it, but at least you understand like, okay, this is more likely to be successful than if we were starting out without checking those three boxes.
Yeah, I think for me, coming from like a journalistic background, your point about like people saying this was a pain point for them resonates with me because a lot of times the companies that I had good relationships with professionally, like covering their news or we just do interviews, etc., they often complain that there was so much going on that they couldn't keep track of it all. And that's like an amazing problem for major blockchains to have. And then even like crypto projects who are like, we talk to our ecosystems, but like, it's, we tweet something out and that's that. Or we have the discords and we have like maybe a community lead that monitors it, whatever. But that kind of speaks to the need for this, in my opinion. And one of the reasons I was really excited to do this is because so many times as a reporter, I was the only person at TechCrunch covering crypto, which is an insane statement because it's like a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Maybe it's 1 trillion at the time of recording. I haven't checked in a while, but I was covering everything that I possibly could. And I'm only one person and I could only do so much. But with that said, there were so many things that deserved coverage that just didn't get it, not just at my company, but across the board. And so I feel like what we're creating here is like an all-in-one place for people to access what has happened, why does it matter? And if it was something that like didn't get enough media coverage or didn't get like the press these projects thought it deserved, this is kind of the opportunity for them to get that platform,
I think that's right. And you've done a fantastic job throughout your career, obviously, in kind of what I'll consider the journalistic bucket, but also understanding what's going on in the crypto industry is really difficult, right? How many kind of legacy journalists, they don't understand the culture. They don't understand the nuances of the technology. The people in the industry don't trust them. Right. All these things are important. And so you found kind of this great overlap for it. And so it was a natural extension for you to say, hey, I think that I understand how to communicate in this industry and understand the nuances and the culture. And I think so far we've seen, pretty great reception to you doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I think, honestly, coming from my reporter background, it was kind of hard to juggle like being in the crypto community, but also being a reporter. And like, I think what I've done so far has worked. I do have a really good relationship with, my followers, but also just like the crypto zeitgeist, crypto culture world in general. And I think that's important in this industry. I used to cover energy. There's no like energy lore on the internet. That's not really something that reporters get into. But when it comes to this space, like you do have to kind of be a part of it. You have to test things out, get on like the DeFi protocols, etc. And instead of just being like a passive reporter, you have to be active to get into the space. And so now, like with the shift of what we're doing, I feel like it's more of an opportunity for me to like really get into it in a way that brings my journalistic background in, but also benefits these projects that want to expand and like engage with their ecosystems.
I think that's right. And also, the way that I've always thought about building companies is like you want to walk before you run. And so we have approached this very much as like, let's go find a couple of design partners, work with them to solve their specific problems. And then we can, take the commonalities among those different ecosystems and bring it to the rest of the industry. I think potential customers enjoy that. Like they like feeling like, hey, you understand my problems. You're building me a custom solution. But also it's a way to kind of back into the correct technology product and kind of solution. Too many people in company building start out with like, I'm a genius. I have the answer, top down, prescriptive, here's the solution. There's a time and a place for that, right? The classic, if you had asked people, if Henry Ford had asked people, what do they want? They said a faster horse. Okay, yes, there's a time and a place for that. But also people underestimate the value of creating a service first, learning, and then building a product off of that. And so I think that for this specific situation, that's the right approach here.
Yeah. And when we launched this, I got really nice responses from my broader crypto community. I've covered the industry like small and large chains, everything and anything in between. So I think, I had a general crypto audience. But for you, I feel like maybe the reception wasn't as great because you have just solely a Bitcoin following, and then, other people in crypto as well, of course. But for the people who see you as like a Bitcoin maxi, so to speak, or someone who's been a long time Bitcoiner, what does this type of business kind of signal to those audiences? And like, have you kind of shifted your perspective?
No, I think that I just haven't cared what people thought for a very long time. And so I don't correct the record, if you will. But a lot of people, frankly, in the crypto industry, they're new, right? Like I think 50% or more of the industry showed up after 2020. And so for the people who've been around for a long time, like I started mining Ethereum in 2016. I was talking about, and pretty sure I coined the phrase tokenize the world in 2017. One of the things all along has been that the Bitcoiners, I think they appreciate, at least my read of it is they appreciate the advocacy and education that I've done for Bitcoin. And they also don't like that I talk about anything else or am excited about any other technologies, et cetera. That's okay. We can agree to disagree on some areas, and then we agree on in other areas. That's kind of how a market works. What I think is also interesting is for a long time, there was people outside of the Bitcoin industry who were like, oh, when he goes on television, he talks about Bitcoin only. And historically, it's because I've always thought that Bitcoin was the lowest risk, kind of asset. It was the one that had the most regulatory clarity. From a responsibility standpoint, for years, it was just talk about Bitcoin. Everything else is still so fragile, and experimentation and regulatory uncertainty, et cetera. Now I think that's starting to change. And so I'm a little bit more willing to talk about some of these other things, but it doesn't mean that I wasn't doing it previously. And so two other things about kind of the launch is one, I love the Maxis. They're the greatest marketing department that I've ever had. When they attack things, I think that I think the original launch post got over 500,000 or 600,000 views on it. I don't know. We had 60 or 70 inbound leads. That doesn't happen without the Maxis losing their minds. And so to a degree, when it was happening, I had people texting me, be like, hey, man, are you okay? I respond the same way to every single one of them. I said, I love it. I appreciate them. These people are going to help us build a business, and they don't even realize it. And so, unfortunately, when they attack and they create all of that controversy, it actually helps businesses more than it hurts. And so if you've just been through it before, you understand kind of the value proposition, and you stay focused on like, what are we optimizing for here? I want everyone to know that we're doing this. They helped us do that. So thank you. And then the other piece of it is when you are willing to go into these new sectors and talk about this stuff, you have to understand that everyone has an opinion, but the market is ultimately the referee. I could be wrong, right? There's things that I talk about or things that I invest in, and I could be wrong. But like the market decides that, not the, arguments on Twitter. And so just as you get a little bit older, a little bit more experience, you the arrogance edge gets dulled a little bit. And you start to realize like, hey, look, I can be wrong sometimes. And like, maybe that's healthy. I need to be really thoughtful. I need to be a critical thinker. I need to make sure that I'm double and triple checking my work, all that kind of stuff. But also you become more insulated from the external opinions. You want to seek out a lot of information. You want to hear everyone out, but like you make the decision. You don't just, go with whoever's the last person you talked with. And I think that just comes with the experience.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I feel like that kind of reminds me of like my own entry into this industry. I was between a job covering asset management or a job covering crypto at what was a small crypto startup at the time, Blockworks. Shout out to them. And the mentors in my life were all telling me like, just take the asset management job. It's at like a really big financial news organization. It's the safest bet. Why would you go cover crypto? What if Bitcoin goes to zero? And I'm like, okay, sure. Like whatever you have to say. And obviously, which one I picked and how I ended up down this line. But I feel like when I first entered crypto, it was kind of like the maxi narrative of Bitcoin. And then you kind of learn about Ethereum, and then you learn about other projects. And it kind of like snowballs into, what is the whole crypto ecosystem. And I feel like maybe down the line, that could be like the journey for others too. But I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Get there for everyone.
And part of this is like nobody knows the answer. And so you have to go on this kind of intellectual exploration. And one of the hard parts about investing in general, but also kind of getting into these new industries is you have to have the mental flexibility to be open-minded and constantly looking at all these new things. But then you have to understand where are the things where you have a mental rigidity to it, right? And one of my favorite phrases or quotes is that you should write your ethics in stone, but your opinions in sand. And I think that there's like a corollary in investing, which is like there's some core principles, buy things for less than they're worth, hold great assets for a long time. Kind of these like timeless investing principles that you should never compromise on. But how you apply them in terms of what assets or what parts of the cycle, et cetera, you have to be very kind of flexible on. And frankly, look, humans are really bad at this stuff. Like there's a reason why, all these major hedge funds, almost no one ever beats the S&P consistently year after year after year, because it's hard. And so I think that's really where, we just, the better that you get at it, the more prepared you are. And if you think of our business, there's a lot of folks who are going to benefit from the experience that you and I bring to the table, but there's also a lot of things that we're going to learn from them. And I think those are the businesses that are kind of most interesting, is where the customer and the service provider or product provider are learning from each other, and it allows them to iterate faster and get towards that solution.
Yeah. I think, without going into like specific details of like who we've spoken to, I'm curious if you can kind of share like what has kind of shocked you the most in the conversations we've had with, potential partners, people we've spoken with before launch, trying to keep it vague, but what like the pain points and problems that we're seeing across the board here.
Yeah, I think that it's very obvious that this is a problem. I think that people are intrigued by the solution that we're bringing to them. I think that people believe that we are underpricing everything if we can do what we say we can do. But part of underpricing is that you want to kind of underpromise and overdeliver. And then I think that it's only going to get worse, which is kind of a key component as well. Is it's not just a pain point today that needs to be solved, but also as the industry grows larger, as these ecosystems get larger, as people get more noise in terms of communication from so many different groups and organizations, the problem gets worse. And so if you can solve it, it's kind of like you have a tailwind at your business. And so like, you and I thought that was true, but I think now we're getting confirmation of all of that. And that's usually a pretty good sign. What have you been surprised by?
Big and small projects have similar problems. And you would think that they have extremely different problems, but one of the biggest pinpoints or pain points that we've noticed is that like accessing their ecosystem in a way that's direct and not controlled by like the social media platforms that we engage with is extremely hard. And I think one of the beautiful things about crypto is like people love to be anonymous. They love to kind of have this like mysterious aspect to them where you don't really know who they are. And that's totally okay. We respect that. We love that. And I've interviewed people who are completely anonymous and pseudo-anonymous. And I think that, we're going to play into that factor of the crypto culture, but also we want to make it in a way that they could have a better relationship with the chains and projects that they engage with. And we're going to find a nice middle ground, I think, to get there and improve something that we're seeing as a problem across the industry in all the different sectors for all companies of like all sizes.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then also like, I don't want to speak for you, but it feels like people also see the value of like product and technology and those things that we're bringing to the table, but also the like journalistic experience and the ability to understand how to create content and narratives and things like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting for me, like candidly, going from a journalist turned entrepreneur role. Obviously, I want to maintain that integrity that I've built up in this space and the reputation. But now that I'm a founder, it's kind of like a balance between like providing the best service that we can, but also taking it from like my journalistic lens. And I feel like a lot of the conversations we have, people don't know how to like form a narrative or even like what is the best way to pitch their company. And I'm not a PR person. I'm not a professional in that world, but I am a professional in receiving that. from PR people, from founders themselves, et cetera. And so for me, it's a different angle that I'm looking at this. And we're working with highly technical people who are like so proficient in coding and everything else. And like that is over my head. But what I'm really good at is taking technical things and making them non-technical and understandable. And I think that's kind of where we come in and we provide this like service that is accessible to everyone across the industry or people who aren't even in the industry who want to learn more, like institutions or, people in DC, et cetera. I think that's where I see a lot of opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. What have been any negative surprises so far?
Am I doing the interview or are you doing the interview?
I just want to
know. Negative surprises thus far. I feel like maybe it's just that and this isn't a negative per se, and I understand this, that some communities just strictly want to hold their relationship and they don't want any external party getting involved. I see the value in having that like niche insular relationship, but I also feel like you could only go so far by keeping it in a bubble, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. What are you most excited about going forward?
If you cannot switch this interview on me.
All right, go ahead. What other questions do you have for me?
You're good. I'll answer your last question. What I'm most excited about is like building this out, working with so many different projects and creating like a customizable solution for so many different areas. I feel like a lot of people thought because we launched with major blockchains, Avalanche, Aptos, and Optimism, that this was a service solely for blockchains. And while that is like a major market for us, we see the potential with like protocols and, smaller projects or ones that aren't even well known or ones that were really cool last cycle and not cool this cycle, and like kind of reviving them and making them like a long-term ecosystem player. So I think the excitement for me is kind of just, making this accessible to everyone and anyone in the industry, not just like the big time winners.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just time. That's all it is. There's so much to do. Not enough time is like always a risk. And then also one of the biggest things that I think will happen in, Bitcoin and crypto in general is just like time needs to pass. If you think about it now, no one under the age of 15 has grown up in a world without Bitcoin. So like eventually that number, 15 years from now will be no one under the age of 30. And in, 25 years, that number will be no one under the age of 40. And so, there are people alive today who remember going off the gold standard. I don't, right? Like my whole life has just been fiat currency. Right. I don't know a different way. What are the boomers talking about history, whatever. And so I just think time passing, normalization, the Lindy effect, all those things kind of take place. And it's kind of like the writings on the wall.
Mm-hmm. We're in this like V1 era of token relations. We're getting it off the ground. We're partnering with people, et cetera. Obviously, every business has to start somewhere. And I hope this episode does not come off as like shilly at all, because we're genuinely just talking about like what we're creating. But if we had this conversation in a year's time, let's say I bring you back on the podcast, what are some like metrics or like successful points that you would use to look back on and be proud of? Like, what do you want us to create?
The single most important thing in a business is, did you solve the customer's problem? And so if we had a laundry list of clients who said, you all said that you could solve this problem, and not only did you solve the problem, but you went above and beyond and over delivered our wildest expectations. I think that would be, one, the most proud, but also probably the greatest signal this is working and will continue to work for the long term. The second thing is we're profitable, we're sustainable. It can survive for a long period of time. We are already profitable, which is nice. But we have to make investments in the business. We're going to have to build out a team. We're going to have to do things that could change in the future. And so I think that it's like, if you solve your customer's problem, then that is a pretty good signal. Like, hey, you've got a business, as long as you're not shooting yourself in the foot in other aspects. And then if you're profitable, you're in control of your destiny. And so those two things I think are most important.
Right. I think obviously you've invested in a lot of businesses. You've started a lot of businesses. How does token relations fit into your portfolio and your long-term game in this space?
It's going to be the biggest, most successful one.
All right. That's the plan. I feel like we got to stop it on that.
we,
No.
we should think that for every business, right?
Right.
I mean, look,
So, yeah.
it's every business has pros and cons. They have challenges and they have opportunities. If I was to play devil's advocate for our own business, I would say, oh, we're starting as a service business. It's really hard to scale. It can be limiting in kind of your business model. It's in a part of the sector where there hasn't been lots of investment historically. So when your customer is kind of a communications team, they're not usually used to spending a lot of money, outsourcing things, et cetera. And it is in a part of the sector where it's hard to measure efficacy. And so, we have some ideas of how we might be able to do that. That could mitigate that risk, but definitely that's a challenge. And so, it's not like, oh, you've got a big audience, you've got a lot of experience, you have capital, and you got the muscle memory starting companies. You snap your fingers and things are successful. You have to be very honest with yourself. And I think this business has the potential to be really attractive business, or I wouldn't have started it, right? I wouldn't have tried to convince you to quit your job and go do it. But at the same time, every business has challenges. And I think part of the role of being an entrepreneur is identifying the risks and then trying to kill them. Right. So, one of the fallacies about entrepreneurship is that they're risk takers. In my experience, it's the opposite, right? People want to understand what is the risk to my business and how do I avoid it? How do I mitigate it so that it is a higher odds of success? And so far, I think we've done a good job of that. But, you don't get credit for kind of the early success. You get credit for what you do over the long run. And so I think we just got to stay focused and we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. You touched on me quitting my job, and I did that willingly and happily. And again, like I've said this to so many people, I feel like a broken record, but I would have not left my role if it wasn't for something that I thought was one, scalable, but also just like a crazy, amazing opportunity. Like what I had at TechCrunch, I was, the senior crypto reporter. I kind of led all the crypto coverage. I had a podcast that was award nominated. I had the newsletter, etc. And now we are kind of like creating our own business, and I'll have this podcast and a newsletter and everything. But it's just such a deep need in the space. And as someone like covering the industry, I've seen it like every single day. And for me, I just feel like this is so important. And I know you've launched businesses with other journalists before. I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on the media landscape. You're laughing because we've had this conversation, but I feel like it's so important to have. It's not a secret.
No, look, I think that journalism is really hard. There's a certain skill set that journalists have. And so if you're building, media or content related businesses, journalists are great people to go and partner with to build that, especially if they have a specific expertise. You had it in crypto, other people we've partnered with in real estate, et cetera, have kind of these deep expertise. At the same time, journalists are probably not the right people to partner with in certain types of businesses, right? If I was going to go try to build, I don't know, a rocket company, hard, unless there's some journalists out there
killing it. Yeah.
well, just like they have expertise.
Yeah.
But they have expertise in a certain area, but like it's different to be an engineer, right? In an engineering business than it is to, have knowledge about an engineering business. And so I think that's like kind of one big thing. The second thing is, look, I'm very critical of the media at the same time that I partner with a lot of the journalists. And I think part of it is like you can separate out, kind of good actors trying to do a good job, do the right thing, all that kind of stuff from, a very small subset of people who probably aren't in that category. And then you can also separate out the individual from the organization, right? That there's organizations where you could put a really good journalist or operator into that environment and the organization corrupts them. Right. And it's this weird thing, like humans are, we're gullible. We want to get along with the people around us. Like all these things are at play. And so I think people would look at it and be like, wait, this is kind of like an oxymoron. On one hand, you can like criticize the media for all their faults, but at the same time, see like the value that they bring in certain areas. And then you can partner with some journalists and, want to literally go become their partners and build businesses. And on the other hand, there's journalists who, they could offer you $1 million to be their partner and you'd walk away in a heartbeat because you don't want to be associated with them. Right. Like, how do you figure that out? Well, it's like that is the challenge of, kind of building companies and investing and stuff like that is you got to be able to, again, think through nuance. You got to be able to evaluate people, and you won't always get it right, but that's okay, right? It's just get it right more times than not, and you'll be okay.
Right. How do you evaluate people? Like, what do you look for when it comes to hiring or partnering with someone when you're starting a company or even investing? I know those are all different categories, but there's got to be characteristics. Yeah.
It's more common than you would think. I think you're looking for somebody who I put them in the bucket of like they're a winner. And what I mean by being a winner is you want somebody who understands they have to work hard. They understand that being a high agency person is a really powerful thing in a world where people are becoming low agency. They are good thinkers in terms of they can, ingest and synthesize a lot of information. And then out of that thinking, they can be a good decision maker. Regardless of what aspect of their life, they make good personal decisions. They make good professional decisions. They, frankly, pick good partners in life. Like, a lot of times, there are red flags. If somebody is a high performer professionally, based on, a short amount of data, but you look at their personal life and you're like, you've made horrible decisions here. It's very hard to turn on, turn off, right? Personal and professional and stuff. And so I think you can kind of underwrite that. And then a lot of times I want to work with people that teach me things, right? It's kind of like, if I go and I just find people who are the same as me or who are, less knowledgeable or depend on me, it's not really a point to having those people in our organization. What I want is I want to find people who actually understand how to do things I don't know how to do or can teach me how to do things that they're experts at. And so if you think about it less of like I'm hiring one person and more of like I'm building a team. If you use a sports analogy, like a basketball coach or a GM looks at their team and they don't just say like, who's the best person out there? They say, I need a point guard. Okay, who are all the point guards? Who's the best point guard? What are the qualities of the point guards, right? Like, and then not only, this is the best point guard available, but also how does this point guard style and, kind of experience and the way they play fit in with the rest of the team? And so you may actually want the second or third best point guard because they play a certain way and have a style that fits better with the team, because the team is the thing that produces the result, not the individual. And so, hiring is incredibly difficult. I was talking with a friend of mine who runs a very large company recently, and we were like, him and I both, like, we actively work to get better at hiring and teasing things out in interviews and stuff like that. How do you teach other people to do it? Founders historically, they interview a lot of their first employees, but at some point you can't do it anymore. And maybe that's at 5,000 employees, maybe it's at 50 employees, right? But at some point you can't. And so then you got to be able to teach your organization how to do this. And so there's like a skill assessment, but there's also like a culture assessment. And if you think about it from the perspective of you want to keep the bad people out, now, not bad as in they're nefarious, but just like if they're not a culture fit, you actually don't want them in your organization because they can be destructive. So there's all these different ways you can cut evaluating talent. And I think that it's just pattern recognition over time, which sounds so stupid, but like your intuition is an algorithm and it's been trained.
I agree with that, yeah.
And the more you meet people, the more you talk to people, like the podcast may be one of the best things I do for hiring, not because tons of inbound talent. I just talk to tons of people and then I track them over time and I see who was successful. And like that person was really impressive. That person surprised me. They weren't impressive, but then they were really successful. Maybe I misjudged them or vice versa. That person, was super impressive and then they're an idiot and they, blew something up. Like, okay, maybe I misjudged them. And so you just try to hone your algorithm over time to the point where you can meet someone and, first 15 or 20 minutes, usually you can pretty quickly get to this is interesting. I want to spend more time with this person or hey, I'm sure they'll be great somewhere, just not in our organization.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. If you feel like you resonated with that, reach out to us. Kidding, kind of, not really.
We are hiring. No, we are hiring. Don't short sell yourself.
Watch, we're going to get like 100 applicants, which would be great. We would welcome you all to apply. Anyways, token relations aside, Pomp, what is one thing you're watching right now in the crypto industry that you think others should pay attention to?
I think that the merging of crypto with the traditional financial world is the single most important story, because there is a new type of capital showing up. There's a new strategy in terms of how people allocate that capital. And there is new narratives that are forming. And the best way that I know how to describe this is like, on one hand, the institutional investors are much stickier. They invest for the long term, all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, now there are going to be more people who hold Bitcoin as an example. And as it goes up, they're going to rebalance their portfolios. Meaning that if, Bitcoin goes from 1% allocation to 3%, they're going to sell down to 1%. That could introduce new sell pressure. So it's positive and negative impacts on that happening. And so trying to pay attention, figure out, what the impact is, I think is pretty important right now.
All right. And lastly, I love to end all my episodes with this, and I'm going to carry it through this new podcast. Can you leave our listeners with a piece of advice?
You're going to die.
Well, okay. That's not advice. That's a statement.
No, it is advice. You're going to die. And when you've come to the realization of the mortality, it changes how you act. It gives you a sense of urgency in certain parts of your life. It reduces the importance of certain things that you previously might have thought were important. It allows you an excuse to do certain things that you might otherwise not have done. And what I find is that as you learn that, as you internalize it, you ultimately just squeeze more enjoyment out of life. And so, no one likes to think about it. It's kind of scary. Young people are like, that's really far away. But I think that just, the reminder that, you're going to die, changes the way that you act. Yeah. And just enjoy life sounds too fluffy. You're going to die is memorable enough where people say, oh shit, like, yeah, okay. I should probably go change some things in my life.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming on today, and I'm excited to build this out with you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be the first guest. Hopefully I'll get invited back another time, sometime in the future, and I'm excited as well.